It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Howdy, howdy, ho, hey, 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 hee, hee. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? We don't have a lot of time to chit-chat today. We've got a very full show. So I'm just going to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Although I think Mother's Day is past, but anyways, belated Mother's Day. We've got a song from a great band that I discovered on, I think, Facebook or Twitter. Then we've got a very full, funny interview with Pam Ferderbar. So, without further ado, let's get to the music. The band is called Mako, M-A-K-O. The band consists of Declan O'Shea and Christian Montang, and they are the brains behind this Irish-French rock group. Before launching Mako, the two were members of the beloved acclaimed band Cyclefly. Cyclefly toured Ireland, the UK, Europe, and the USA, sharing the stage with bands such as Bush, Live, Iggy Pop, and Linkin Park. After the end of Cyclefly, they regrouped and formed Mako. Mako retains the edgy alternative rock sound like Cyclefly, yet it has a mellow maturity, reflecting the pair's growth as songwriters and as musicians. Mako is currently working on their second studio album, due for release later this year. And now here is Mako with Unstoppable.
Disillusion takes my mind on this cold November morning to another place in time. It removes me without warning. Now my passenger is life. Circumstance is my abuser as we juggle wrong from right to confuse her. Spare my eyes. I burn my youth with this conviction. Time and time I hide a truth with my addiction. This condition is my shrine, like the crooked hand that molds me, superstitiously divine. Repetition still controls me, when compassion will combine, like a fashion for the fruitless. Every consequence will shine and elude us. Spare my eyes. I burn my youth with this conviction. Time and time I hide a truth with my addiction. Round and round and round it goes. Perdition wears the emperor's new clothes, and I go with the motion. Don't take for your single self these spoken words of consequence. Human nature kills our king. Time replaces everything. Spare my eyes. I burn my youth with this conviction. Time and time I hide a truth with my addiction. Round and round and round it goes. Perdition wears the emperor's new clothes, and I go with the motion.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. See? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Wrong hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
She's an author, screenwriter, and more recently, a blogger for the Huffington Post. She has written a screenplay called Bob Dylan Stole My Wife and a novella called Feng Shui and Charlotte Nightingale. Okay, please welcome Pam Ferderbar. Hi, Pam. How are you?
I'm well, Douglas. How are you?
Doing good. I wanted to start with, you've got so many different things on your bio, and all of it sounds really interesting. And we'll get to each piece of it through the interview. But I wanted to start at the beginning, because even your childhood sounds sort of comical in a sense. I'm just going to read this little bit here. It says, you were the only child of two loving but quirky parents who fostered your creativity by setting a place at the table for your imaginary friend, Doka, is that how you pronounce it? Daka, okay. And preparing his favorite invisible food, Mugger.
Yep.
Okay, well, I missed those, but I got your last name right, so we're okay. Tell us about that. Tell us about your imaginary friend and the imaginary food.
Well, I had Daka with me for a very long time until I was probably pretty well into grade school. I think he arrived probably around the time I was 2.5. As an only child, and my grandmother lived upstairs from us, so I was very much around adults most of the time, and there were not a lot of little kids in my neighborhood, and of course you're not going to send a 2-year-old out to play anyway. And I just, I don't know, I guess maybe I wanted someone my own age or my own mentality. I'm not exactly sure, but according to my folks, he popped in one day, and I do remember him. I mean, I have such a strong picture of him in my mind. I could draw him for you right now if I had to. He was kind of a fur-covered penguin, about the size of a penguin, he didn't have flippers or anything. He had like little fuzzy feet, but no arms, and he had big brown eyes. He didn't have a beak or anything. He just had kind of a fuzzy mouth, and he didn't talk. He just hung around with me. And I don't know how I knew that his kind of food was mugger, but that's what it was called. And I remember I would be hysterical if my mother wouldn't lay a place for him at the table with a bowl. And as I recall, mugger was a sort of gruely type thing. And growing up in Wisconsin, and in the winters, it was so cold. We ate a lot of cream of farina. I don't know if you even know what that is.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's glorified gruel. I mean, that's the way to describe it.
It's
with
porridge,
lots of butter.
Right?
Yes, exactly. So mugger was like porridge, and that was his sustenance. And then I was I had a burst appendix when I was 7, and that was the result of like the little boy who cried wolf. I had to go to mass every day because I went to Catholic grade school, and I was terrified of mass. It was in Latin, and the nuns still wore the big black habits and the ugly black boot things, and I was terrified. So I was forever inventing ailments so that I would be kept home until Mass was over and I could just go to school. And one day I really was sick, but no one believed me. And it turned out that my appendix had been burst for probably 12, 13 hours. And I ended up in the hospital for a couple of months. I had peritonitis and whatnot. And that's when I became conscious of the fact that DACA was gone. So he probably disappeared sometime in my 6th or 7th year.
Now, DACA sounds like a Furby.
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Is that what he looks like?
So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good description. He was my little Furby friend.
Long before Furbies were invented, though, so you could be credited for that.
The mother of Furbies.
The mother of Furby, yeah, if you had it in your imagination. But somebody got to the copyright office before you did.
Yeah, damn it.
Okay, so it sounds like, now I want to talk about your father, actually, for just a few minutes, since we're on your childhood. He was a student of Ansel Adams. First of all, let me back up and say that your family has a photography studio. Is that correct?
We did. We
You
did.
did.
My father
Okay.
sold it in 1998, I believe.
But he was a student of Ansel Adams?
Yep.
How did
Yep.
one...
With him in 19... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how did one become a student of Ansel Adams?
My father was very, very young in 1958. He knew that he wanted to be a photographer, I guess, from the time he was about 12 years old. He was a huge fan of Ansel's in the 50s, the late 50s already. Ansel was not well known then at all. But in the fine art photography circles, especially if you like landscape photography, he was the god. And, you know, he had by then was in the process of developing or had developed the zone system. So all the photographers were talking about that. My dad got wind of a workshop that Ansel was doing in Yosemite. And he took, I don't know, it was either 10 or 20 students for, I think it was 2 weeks. They went out and they worked from sunup till sundown. And then every evening, a student was invited to have dinner with Ansel and his wife, Virginia. My dad said it was the pivotal moment in time in his life as a photographer. He said Ansel was an incredible human being, funny as all get out, super sense of humor, really, really bright, and just a kind person. And the entire workshop cost $100.
Wow.
I know. And the other thing is that but $100 to my dad back then might as well have been, 100,000, right? Because, he was a young man and, trying to be a photographer. He wasn't raking the money in. And he had an opportunity to purchase some prints, some Ansel Adams prints that Ansel would sign for them for $100. But I mean, my dad could barely scrape together the 100 for the workshop. Of course, now those prints are worth $50,000, $60,000, $70,000.
Right.
So, but kind of a cool thing, before Ansel passed away, he acquired 6 pieces of my dad's work from that time to put in the permanent collection at the Virginia and Ansel Adams Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona.
Wow.
So my dad is in Ansel's permanent collection, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is. What kind of pictures did your father take? Was it similar, or did he do landscapes? Or
Well, when he was in Yosemite, it was all landscapes and some, in details. The side of a barn, water. But it was all outdoor. I guess you would call it landscape work. When he returned from the workshop, determined that, if he was going to have a family and whatnot, that fine art photography probably wasn't the most responsible path to take. And he decided to become an advertising photographer, a commercial photographer. Ended up with probably the largest advertising photography studio in the Midwest. We had 5 full-time photographers. We had someone who did food and tabletop. We had someone who did fashion. We had someone who did sheet metal, like boats, motorcycles, cars, that kind of thing. So it was kind of a cool way to grow up. And my dad was very successful at it. He worked very, very hard, and he's very, very talented. And he, in the 80s, started doing a lot of work for General Electric Medical Systems and was traveling all over the country and got really interested in how Route 66 was decaying. And he had taken Route 66 as a boy in the late 40s, from Chicago to LA with his mom and his uncle. So he decided he wanted to revisit Route 66 and chronicle this decay. And it became a very emotional thing for him. And he'd been shooting it and shooting it and shooting it whenever he could, even though he still was doing the business side of photography, the advertising photography. So when he sold the business in 1998, he said, I always wondered if I would have made it as a fine art photographer. And I get kind of choked up because I don't think very often in life you get to ask a question like that and then find out the answer. I went out with his portfolio. I was in California at the time and just started traveling with it. And he ended up having a one-man show at a museum in Los Angeles. He has more than a dozen pieces in the permanent collection in the Milwaukee Art Museum. Ansel in Virginia acquired 6 of his pieces. He's in collections all over the place now, and he knows that he would have done just fine as a fine art photographer. And now he's shooting again. Now he's doing the Tetons. And he's 87 years old.
So you worked at the studio for a while.
I did until 1994.
Okay.
Pretty much the time I was about 9 years old. So.
Okay. And in 1994, you moved to Los Angeles where you directed commercials for Microsoft, Wells Fargo Bank, Bally's, ITT, and others. Mm-hmm. Now, these were video commercials, or did you...
Film. They were 60-second or 30-second, mostly 60-second television commercials. We shot on 35-millimeter film. Back in the day, there wasn't the high def, and video wasn't what it is now. So the big boys, we all shot on film.
On film, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Was it easy or difficult to make the transition from still photography to film?
I was never a still photographer. I always thought that I would be a writer, but I worked at the studio from the time I was a child. I used to mow the lawn at the studio, and then I was the sort of a janitor. I'd clean the bathrooms and paint the sweeps and do whatever needed doing. And, I was a receptionist. I worked in the black and white lab for a while. I was an assistant, kind of did all sorts of things. And I don't know why I didn't pursue the photography thing, but I was super interested in video and film production, specifically television commercials. So started a division that took us in that direction. Within a couple of years, kind of the biggest thing we did at that time was, and it was a real weird chain of events that led to this happening, but we ended up directing and producing about 99% of all the national commercials for the Bush Quail 88 campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was just crazy. Those were different times in politics, though. People were still polite and, it just wasn't so vitriolic. And
yeah, that's gone out the window, hasn't it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But so that got me into film production. And then after that, I had an opportunity to direct a commercial for no money for the Wisconsin AIDS Project. And it ended up being on the Clio All-Star Reel. And the Clios are the TV commercial equivalent of an Oscar.
Right. Oh, that's great.
Yep, that kicked things off for me. Having that kind of feather in my cap got me started. Then I decided to move to California, because how hard could it be to go from that to directing a major motion picture?
Well, I suppose in theory, yeah. Yeah, it's just a little longer, that's all, right?
I'm still waiting, Douglas. I'm still waiting.
It also said here in your spare time that you wrote some screenplays. One of them called Bob Dylan Stole My Wife. I assume that's Bob Dylan, the singer?
It is, and it's not really about Bob Dylan. It's just about a man who absolutely never pays attention to what his wife is saying to him, because he's self-obsessed with his, construction business and his softball and his snowmobiling, and it all takes place in northern Wisconsin. And when his wife doesn't return from a Bob Dylan concert in Green Bay, he has to try to figure out what's gone wrong. And it's assumed that she's run off with Bob Dylan.
Oh,
so yeah, it's very, very, very funny, and it's very quirky. It's kind of along the lines of The Way, Way Back or Little Miss Sunshine.
Little Miss Sunshine was a great movie. I like that movie a lot.
I loved it. I
Yeah.
found it very inspirational.
I especially love the end when her dance gets a little bit too sexual for the tastes of the judges. I thought that was just
Grandpa
funny.
was just, I mean, I know. See, I love that kind of humor that's completely out there, but it tickles my funny bone. Even now, just you saying I particularly like the ending. I have tears running down my face. I can just visualize it.
Oh yeah. I really enjoyed that movie. I like Paul Dano. I think he's a fantastic actor.
He is.
Yeah.
He is.
He's done some. I just watched recently. I watched Love and Mercy, where he played the young Brian Wilson of the Beach
I
Boys.
haven't seen that yet. Is it great?
It's great. If you're a music fan, I mean, I'm a musician and I like to watch a lot of music documentaries and things about, the ones that I grew up with. And that one was really good. The critics hated it. I don't know why, but I loved it. I thought it was fabulous. I liked the idea that they used two different actors to play Brian. One when he was young and one when he was like a middle-aged man. Both Paul Dano and John Cusack did a fabulous job. Yeah, it's definitely worth seeing if you put it on your short list of movies I must watch kind of thing.
Absolutely. It has been on there for a while. I just have to make myself get around to it.
Okay, so the other thing that was interesting on here is it says in 1990. Now, wait a minute, let me back up. The Bob Dylan Stole My Wife. You're currently seeking financing for a Wisconsin-based production for that. How's that going?
Well, I would encourage everyone listening.
Oh, that good. Huh? Okay.
I've recently become the president of a nonprofit fine art photography organization here, and unbeknownst to me, this is like a 40-hour-a-week proposition, unpaid. And between that and writing, and I'm supposed to be writing a follow-up to the Charlotte Nightingale novel, and then the blogging and everything else, it has kind of fallen by the wayside, which is troubling to me because from everything and from people who I know actually know Mr. Dylan, he smokes like 5 packs of cigarettes a day.
Bob Dylan does?
Yeah, he ain't going to live forever.
Oh,
and
wow.
It really would take some of the zing out of the film. God forbid he were dead. I mean,
well, yeah, then it would be a historical piece, wouldn't it?
Hysterical and historical. I guess we could.
Yeah.
But yes, it could be done for, in Hollywood parlance, for a nickel, which, I could do it for $800,000 or something, which when you come from LA really sounds like a nickel until you sit down and go, okay, how do I get $800,000? And then that's a lot of money.
Well, it is to the average Joe, but to a Hollywood studio, that's not that much money.
But it's not a studio picture. That's right now, the way things go is the studios want to do big films, $80, $100, $200, $300 million films based on graphic novels or comic book heroes, or that are, sort of remashes of other things, and not being there anymore. Even the smaller production companies, everybody's looking for the big score, it seems, and nobody's out there acting, like Little Miss Sunshine and Ruby. I'm trying to think of, all of our favorite sort of little indie films. Those people had to beg and scrape and borrow and steal to get those films made. It seems almost insurmountable. I know that it's not, because those films got made. But, complicating things is the fact that I am in Wisconsin now. So I can't even harass people as I would normally have been doing if I were still there.
The story is funny. I mean, it seems to be somebody would want it, but I don't know. How do you go about shopping something like that around?
Well, I don't have an agent anymore. I have a book agent, but I don't have a lit agent for films. Again, if I were there, there's a million different ways to do it, but reaching out through friends to find an actor that would be interested in doing it, and it would have to be an actor that has the kind of juice that could get a movie like that, in quotes, greenlit. So maybe Paul, if it were like, say, Paul Dano said, oh yeah, I would love to do this, that would give us enough clout to then try to find like a director who had enough juice to get it made. I mean, it's a whole,
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's a ball of wax. I'll send you the script.
Well, certainly, yeah, if you get the right actor, that does sort of give you lifts in your shoes to, I guess, to work a deal. But aren't some of the actors under exclusive contract with certain studios? I mean, can they go off and do indie films?
Oh, sure.
They can.
Yeah, I think that the days of them being under contract to studios are pretty much over. They're all independent agents. But the thing is that, if you get $20, $30, $40 million a film, your agent, your manager, your lawyer are very, very protective of you. And there's not a whole lot of upside unless they think it's Academy Award material to letting you spend months out of your life working on a little film. So there's a lot of mitigating factors, to trying to, you never see, or rarely, I should say, Tom Cruise, say, or, the George Clooney.
The A-list actors, right?
Right. Yeah. Unless in a little indie film, unless they also directed it or their production company is producing it and,
or
I don't know.
Their wife wrote it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, I kind of get the idea now. Since you brought up $800,000, I did want to bring this up. It says, in 1998, you wrote a novella called Feng Shui and Charlotte Nightingale. Now, before we get into that, I tried to think of how I could explain feng shui to people. And I know what it is, but I can't think of how I would explain it that it would make any sense to anybody. And I'll tell you why, because I was in Hong Kong a couple of years ago. We went up to the top of the peak and, you get the view of the whole city. There's this one building that's kind of right in the front of your view. And it's this huge skyscraper, has to be 70 stories tall. And right at the top, about 3/4 of the way up the building, there's a giant hole in the building. And that's it. It's the strangest looking thing, but it was about the feng shui. And that's why they put this giant hole in the middle of the building. So the windows and the glass just kind of go around the hole, and there's this big hole. That was the best description I could give of what feng shui is a giant hole in a building, which isn't the greatest description. So maybe you can do better than that. What is feng shui?
Firstly, I'm going to gander a guess here at the hole in the building and say that there are shapes that are considered unfortunate or that impede the flow of good chi, which is good energy. They have their shar chi, which is like the poison arrows of bad luck. And those shapes are things like arrows, obelisks. So I'm guessing that this building has somehow a resemblance to an obelisk, which is like this lightning rod for bad luck. So, and I know there are feng shui people who are going to absolutely send me hate mail, but this is my own, stripped down how I understand it. So I'm going to guess that the hole is a way for energy and chi to travel through the building rather than being converted into all this bad chi. There's a flow of positive energy through that otherwise unfortunate shape, through that hole.
All right.
So feng shui is basically the flow of energy. And much like how our bodies function, if you're blocked up in any way, you're not completely healthy. So when people have a lot of clutter around them, energy cannot move freely. It's the same thing. There are things blocking the flow of energy. And it's almost like the energy gets confused, and in that confusion, it can turn bad. It can turn from what is the good chi again? I can't remember, but to shar chi, which is the bad energy. So, and there's all kinds of little things, like you never, ever, ever want to have a mirror facing your bed. Now, to me, that's just common sense, because should you wake up in the middle of the night and open your eyes, you could scare the crap out of yourself, and then you realize it's you with, your hair's all messed up. But things like putting the toilet seat down, water plays a huge part in feng shui, and it's energy and it needs to flow freely. But when you leave the toilet seat up, it's believed that your good luck, your good energy will go down the toilet. So it isn't just that women say put the seat down. Thousands of years of history say it's the right thing to do.
Well, that's really interesting. Okay, first of all, I didn't know that they had toilets 1,000 years ago.
4,000. I think feng shui's been around 4,000 or 5,000 years.
But I always thought there was a logic to putting the seat down. Now, being a man, the reason being is that if you think of the bodily functions of the woman and the man when we have to go to the bathroom, chances are the seat will be down more times than it'll be up.
Right.
Right? So it's just logical that the seat should stay down. Therefore, you don't have to move it as much, and you won't cause as much wear and tear on the hinges.
There's that, and then there's the getting up in the middle of the night as a woman and falling through when it's up. So
right.
No matter how you slice it, this is all very bad.
Well, because women would always have the seat down, where men would have the seat down 50% of the time. So it's 75% down, 25% up. It should stay down.
I couldn't agree more. I will sign a petition if you put one out there. It just looks nicer.
Well, actually, to me, it looks nicer when the lid's closed.
Yes, that's what I'm talking the lid. I mean, you want to keep the lid down if you don't want all your good luck to go down the toilet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The lid. Okay. Well, I was talking about the rim, the seat. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, definitely when you have company, I always put the cover down.
Yeah.
But I tend not to leave the cover down in the middle of the night because I'll forget it's down. And then that can be brutal in the morning when you wake up.
You must not have dogs.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
And they don't drink out of the toilet?
Well, I have a small dog. He can't reach.
Because that is a consideration with a larger pet.
That's true. Let me get back to the feng shui and Charlotte Nightingale.
Please.
Enough toilet talk for today. First of all, you wrote the novella, and then it says here that New Line Cinema purchased the rights in a record-breaking $800,000 deal. Mm-hmm. And then a few months later, all the executives on the project were fired, and your movie was shelved.
Yep.
Now, I want to ask you why that happened, and then I want you to tell us a little about the story.
Why that happened was there was a merger between AOL and Time Warner. And I always get it backwards, but either AOL or Time Warner owned New Line. And when the merger occurred, they wanted to bring in all new executives to take over at New Line. And when the new executives come in, they came from other places. They all had projects that they were championing and they were working on and were in the middle of development or whatever. And they don't want to pick up someone else's work. And it was such a shock when everybody was let go and New Line owned the rights outright. So it wasn't like a producer could have taken it with him or her somewhere else. So it just languished. It was literally sitting on a shelf sort of in no man's land. If there's that was like the original Charlotte moment. She's got nothing but bad luck. So it's like, well, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. But now it's so many years later, and now there is an actual novel that all of those executives, for the most part, the ones that had come in and replaced my executives, they're also gone. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is it will reignite some interest in the story. It was a lot of money to pay for what was basically an idea because there was no screenplay and it wasn't a book per se. So that kind of tells me the idea has some merit. So I am hoping that as the book gathers steam, they will revisit it and decide to make it. And the consistent review that I get across the board is people find it very cinematic when they're reading it. They tell me, oh, I could totally see all of this happening. And I think probably from having directed television commercials and having like a lens on my eye from even being in the womb because of my dad, I view the world through in a very sort of narrow focus like that. So all of my writing tends to be quite descriptive. I try to create a world, a little universe, so you feel like you're right in it. And I don't know. I mean, of course I'm going to say this, but to me, it's so clearly a movie. You know, I mean, it's got it all, Douglas. It's got it all.
A novella is what is the difference between a novella and a novel? I'm guessing a novella is just a short novel.
Yeah, this was somewhere between a short story, a novelette, a novella. I think it was 42 pages long, something like that. 42, 72.
Now, what's a novelette?
Sure. I'm not exactly sure what the delineations are lengthwise, but I think a novelette, a novella, a long short story are all kind of the same thing.
Okay.
I'm bringing it here on that one, Douglas.
Had you signed the contract for the deal when this happened?
Sure.
Oh.
There were two contracts, actually. There was the film rights. I did retain the publishing rights, which was excellent. And then there was a second contract because they hired me to adapt the story to a screenplay. And it was in sort of the beginning of that process that this transition occurred. So that's kind of a difficult thing now because there's no script. But there is a novel. Well,
so I guess the big question is, did they pay you?
I got paid half of the $800.
Did you have to give it back?
No.
Oh.
No, and you know, to this day, I mean, it's sort of in perpetuity. If they ever make the film, I should say when they make the film, I get the second half when they commence photography on it. So,
well, you would think that would be a little bit of an incentive for them to want to complete the project since they've already put out $400,000.
Plus. I mean, they paid me a nice chunk for writing the screenplay as well, but that's chump change. You know, it really.
Yeah, I said when you're talking Time Warner, yeah, that's that's chump change.
Yeah.
And especially where an emerger, a lot of that sort of transitional costs, if you will, can be written off. So they might have made money on their tax break.
Right. Who knows? So, I mean, it was collateral damage, basically.
Right. Okay, tell us about the story, though. Feng Shui and Charlotte Nightingale.
Well, it's about a young woman with the worst luck in the world. Charlotte, is the poster child for bad feng shui. Her apartment is a disaster. It's cluttered. She's got obelisks. She's got these overhead beams that are painted black, dead plants. Her plumbing is a nightmare. You know, always things are backing up or the water doesn't run. Mirror facing the bed. I mean, it literally, I did a lot of research on feng shui and I threw the kitchen sink at her with everything that could possibly be wrong feng shui wise. So it's no surprise then that her boyfriend is a schmuck. He steals her rent money. He's a Frank Sinatra impersonator, kind of a bum. Her job, she has the worst job in the world. She's the cashier in the service department at an auto dealership that's crooked. So when people come to pay their bills and get their keys for, you know, having wiper blades replaced or an oil change and it's $1,700, she's behind the bulletproof glass because they all want to kill her. Her landlord absolutely hates her because her plumbing never works. So she's able to lather her hair up with shampoo and then the water cuts off. So she's forever going out on the balcony having to rinse her hair with the 5-gallon Sparkletts bottles. And it runs off of her balcony onto his and it keeps killing his cacti. So he hates her. Her car is this hoopty car that, it's almost like the Flintstone thing. She has to put her foot outside of it to make it go. So she, and then her parents are terrible to her. And she has a younger sister who is the golden girl, who has never had a pimple, who's got the perfect body, the blonde hair, and is recently engaged to a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. One night, Charlotte comes home from just the classic crappy day at work, and she orders some Chinese food, and the man that brings her Chinese food is a feng shui practitioner on the side. And when she opens the door, he shudders because it is, like I said, she's the poster child for bad feng shui. And while she disappears into her closet to find the money to pay him, because she's always broke, she has to excavate the old purses and the jacket pockets and all that, he moves a few little things around in her apartment, hoping to bring her a little relief, that maybe because he says, "Oh, how are you?" And she starts telling him everything that's wrong, and he thinks, "Oh God." So he's now curious to see whether her life has improved or not. So he starts delivering food to her that she didn't even order. And what happens the very next day after he does his first sort of on the sly feng shui is her luck goes from bad to worse, or so it seems. So now it isn't just that her boyfriend steals her rent money. She finds a Polaroid of her boyfriend in a very compromising position with someone who appears to be a hooker in Charlotte's own bed, which begs the question, who took the picture? Her car isn't just a hoopty car. It like blows up. She doesn't just have this terrible job. She gets fired from the terrible job. And making matters worse, she finds out her sister is engaged and she's invited to the engagement party that very night. So everything that can go wrong goes wrong. And so Quan is his name. He keeps coming back thinking he's got to do more feng shui to help her. And every time he comes back, things have gotten worse and worse and worse. And she eventually, so he starts to kind of crush on her a little bit. And he starts doing a little bit of love feng shui, which has a bizarre effect that he certainly never saw coming. And it is the catalyst for her to embark on this huge adventure. She has to ride the bus because her car has imploded or exploded. And she meets a woman on the bus, and it sets off this chain of events that are screwball and comical and possibly driven by feng shui until this juggernaut finally screeches to a halt when she decides she's not taking it anymore. People are going to stop walking all over her. And she actually starts to like herself. She somehow, through all of this, throws her shoulders back and develops or relocates her self-esteem and her self-confidence. And at that moment, her luck changes. So, and I don't want to tell you the ending because it's everything gets sewn up in a kind of odd way, but it's a happy ending. To me, what's interesting is the question always of luck or good fortune. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Or she's so lucky, all these things, all good things always happen to her. And I don't know the answer to this, but I often wonder, is it that if like people that pray really hard on something, or they do mitzvah, or they have a rabbit's foot, or they believe in voodoo, and all of a sudden good things that they wish for start happening, is it because there's a force out there that hears this and kind of gives you a leg up? Or is it just that you've focused on this so hard in this wishing and prayer and all this other stuff that you're making this happen for yourself? Is it just maybe the luck of the draw, just coincidence? Or is it a little combination of all the above? I don't know. But I love that question.
Well, it's a great question, and people have been trying to answer that for centuries. I would go for D, all of the above.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the answer regarding faith or higher power. And I don't think anyone else does on this planet either. And people
Right.
are busy killing each other over which version of that is the correct one. Okay. So there's that. Pure luck. Yeah, it happens. I recently had on a woman who is a psychic and a medium.
I listened to that.
Oh,
show.
you did. Lorna Adams, right?
Yep.
And I admit I was really skeptical before she came on. And after I talked to her, I was less skeptical. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that she called that was your spirit guides. That would be her answer to that, would be your spirit guides are looking out for you. Because she said they're able to stop time and they're able to, if you're going to die and it's not your turn to die, then they can avoid the accident or whatever. Okay, there's that explanation of it.
But what if your spirit guides are really nothing more than your awareness? You because you've been focused on some kind of whatever it is, result. And you've been praying, or you've been rubbing a rabbit's foot, or you've been lighting incense, or, any number of those things. What if you become your own spirit guide? You know what I mean? You're about to, whoops, sorry, I just bashed into the computer. You're about to cross the street and you just, whoop, I better look both ways. And, oh, good thing I did, or I would have been run over by the bus. I don't know. Is that a spirit guide doing that for you? Or is it just that we, by focusing on something, become more aware and kind of create our own fortune, good or bad? I don't know.
I don't either. Yeah, I really don't know either. But there's a lot of different explanations, and I think they're all valid. I will say this. I think if you believe it to work, it might work.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it, then it probably won't work.
Well, I think there have been a number of studies, actually, that have shown. There was one out of Germany, like in 2010. It was a study on luck, believe it or not. And wasn't it Tennessee Williams that said we make our own luck? I'm paraphrasing. But in this study, they found that optimistic people, i.e. people who saw the glass as half full rather than half empty, tended to be luckier in life.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
If you walk around and you tell everybody, I'm lucky, everything is going my way, things tend to go that person's way. Whereas the guy or the woman with the shoulders kind of schlumpy, who is, woe is me, that's the one the bird shits on their head. I mean, it just...
Well, there is truth to that. And if you look at people that are successful, particularly like extremely wealthy people, they all have that optimistic thing in common, where no matter how tough the odds were, they keep going. They keep going with this perseverance that I'm going to get there at some point. And they never lose sight of that. And eventually they do. They just plow through all of the crap, and the people that told them, no, you can't do it, the naysayers.
Yeah.
And they do it. So there is, and those people will always tell you that the glass is half full.
Right. I just wonder about, though, so yes, there was, Steven Spielberg said, you'll find one consistency with all successful people, and that is that they just kept going. As you just said, okay, well, those are the successful ones. I also have to think, though, there's a lot of people that just kept going that went right into the toilet because, there's an awful lot of people with optimism and that are willing to work really hard that didn't necessarily, no matter how hard they tried and how positive they stayed, they didn't have, sometimes you got to be in the right place at the right time. You got to know the right people. There is an element of luck. Like the movie stars that get discovered, or the models, that get discovered sitting at a counter somewhere, would they have become famous models or actors regardless of that? Who knows?
Well, that's a good point. And the other thing I wanted to bring up with that is, you said the one that just keeps going and going and falls right into the toilet. Some people are on the wrong road.
No, that's true.
They're a little bit blinded by whatever they think is at the end of the road. I'll give you a perfect example. I get inundated with music for people that want to have it played on my show.
Yeah.
A lot of it is good. Some of it's great. And some of it is horrible. Now, the people that give me the horrible music could be one of those who's going to end up in the toilet, because they tend to blast this stuff out to everybody who has a podcast, every radio station in the country. They work very hard. But the problem is they're blind to the fact that their music sucks.
I don't know.
I don't know. What do you do? Yeah. What do you do with these people? I mean, I don't want to be the one to tell them.
Well, right. I mean, but by the same, I mean, I marvel at this all the time, that how do you, I mean, when you see a movie that's a real stinker and it's got a big actor in it, and I mean, the obvious answer is they did it for the money, because I often wonder, did you not read the script? I mean, it was on the page that this thing was a dud. You know, what happens with people who have a bad product, but they keep pushing that boulder up the hill? I shouldn't laugh because that's Charlotte, you know.
Yeah, but you said eventually there's a happy ending to it, right?
Well, she changes her perspective.
I wanted to ask you something about that, because when you were talking about, when you were telling us about the novel, the story, you're right. Immediately, it's a movie. I mean, it's so blatantly clear this would make a very funny movie. Who would you want, if you had the choice of everybody who's anybody, who would you want to play Charlotte?
Well, I did a Skype book club yesterday with my friend Lois Keller in Studio City, and a lovely group of women. And someone suggested Kirsten Dunst, which had not occurred to me. She would be fantastic. I also think, though, that Jennifer Lawrence is such a great comedic actress. You
don't think they're too good looking to be Charlotte? I'm picturing Charlotte as not being particularly good looking.
Well, you know, when New Line bought this, they were in business with a management company called Industry Entertainment, who at the time represented Cameron Diaz, and they thought it was a great vehicle for her. So, you know, I think a good actress, so much of it is in the attitude. When you round the shoulders a little bit and you don't have the $600 highlights in the hair and the beautiful makeup and, you know, a stylist, and I think, you know, a good actress could certainly pull it off.
I think so, but, you know, to ugly up Cameron Diaz would take a lot of ugly.
Yeah, she's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean.
But see, that's the thing about Charlotte. If you, nowhere is she described as being ugly, but she lacks self-confidence. And the world has just beat her down. And little things, like because the plumbing never works, she never really fully gets the shampoo out of her hair. So her hair is always like flat and dull and kind of stringy.
Okay.
And her clothes are really crappy because she's poor and the clothing rack fell down and she just doesn't have the energy to put it back up. So she pulls out of the pile things with hems falling down, whatever. Her makeup is all falling apart. I mean, so much of it is in her attitude. And the cool thing is she is the exact same person at the end. It isn't like the universe suddenly, you know, she gets a better figure, or her, you know what I mean? But all of a sudden her hair is shiny because the plumbing is working again, and she's loved, and she loves herself. And as a woman in particular, I can tell you that there are days when you just don't feel really good about yourself. And I know for a fact that when I go out into the world, I'm not going to turn any heads, and, you know, no, but then there are days when you just feel great. And even if you're just coming from the gym and you don't have any makeup on and you're sweaty and you got the greasy ponytail and the sweatpants, but you feel good about yourself, people turn, they smile, men wink at you. I mean, it's all in the attitude.
And
So
I think it's the energy you're giving off that people pick up
yeah,
on. Yeah.
pheromones maybe. I don't, something like that.
If you're giving off this sort of negative vibe, people will pick up on it. Yeah. You see those people walking down the street that turns all the heads. Now, they can be physically beautiful, but there's also, I've seen physically beautiful people that were a complete turn off simply because of their attitude.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I've met people who, when I looked at them, I went, eh. But then as I got to know them, they had such a great attitude that they became more beautiful the more I got to know them.
Right.
Yeah. On the flip side, I've seen people that were physically model quality who, after talking to them for about a minute and a half, I said, I don't want anything more to do with this person.
And you just think, oh, what an ugly person.
Well, I thought, what a waste,
Yeah.
I mean, trade your body in for something less beautiful because you're just wasting it,
That's very funny.
There's no substance, underneath that beautiful skin.
I dare you to say that to somebody sometime.
Well, if I ever meet somebody again like that, I just might. Pam, we are running out of time real quick, and I wanted to get to your latest thing that you're doing, which is you're blogging for the Huffington Post, you told me.
I am.
Tell me about that.
You can find me under Huffington Post or HuffPo Ferderbar. It's in the comedy section, and I usually post sometime Friday afternoons, but they're all there. I started blogging for them in November, and that's going really, really well. I'm very excited. Usually the featured blog when I do post, so I've got a pretty good following, and they're funny with a heart of gold, like me.
So are these editorials, or are they just fictitious humor?
No, they're about real stuff.
They're about real stuff.
They're observational humor to a great extent.
Like you talking about Donald Trump's hair? Or...
I don't do political.
Okay.
Because that for me is a rabbit hole out of which I would never be able to climb. There's just too much there right now.
Yeah. It's
not snarky humor. I tend not to be mean-spirited in my humor, but it's topical. And it's oftentimes very self-deprecating, because for as world-wise as I think that I am, I probably am the most naive person on the globe. And so things that other people saw coming a mile away hit me, and I go, didn't see that coming. And then I write about that. So,
well, it sounds interesting, and I will take a look at it. Your website is pamferderbar.com, Pam, Pamferderbar. You took a lot of R's for your last name. And,
not by choice.
And please check her out. We are out of time for this interview, Pam, but I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was a treat talking to you. I hope the book becomes a movie, because I would definitely go see that. That sounds hysterical.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. This went so quickly. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Pam Ferderbar, and also to Mako. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the